Welcome, everybody, to the Aravosis Report. John Aravosis here to talk to you about the latest news from Ukraine. Calling in from Chicago for the next 6 weeks, visiting mom out here. Otherwise, I will be back in D.C. come the new year. The way the show always works, you guys know, we're going to do a little bit of news to start with and then Q&A. Maybe just introduce yourselves as always for about half a minute or so, and then I'll start the TikTokers. But the TikTokers fly in like flying monkeys. They arrive quite quickly. So as soon as I put that, so I'm adjusting my side light here. There we go. Not so bad. Not so bad. Anyway, hello everybody. Thank you, Music Girl. That was very sweet of you. Not officially my birthday till Sunday, but nonetheless, don't mind people celebrating early. Anyway, yeah. So like I said, we'll start TikTok in a second here, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, just a little bit of Kanye West news. I'll start that maybe. Maybe I'll start the show just mentioning a quick little Kanye thing, which was really obnoxious. Hold on, still adjusting my light here. It's okay. Good enough. Good enough. Bonsoir de Quebec. Oh, all right. Let me go start the TikTokers here. TikTokers. Thank you, Karen. All right. Boom and boom. There we go. All right. Wait for this. All right. Hopefully my connection's okay on YouTube tonight. All right. Notifying TikTokers now. All right. Whoa. Burp, 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 burp. Burp. Hello, Dark Phoenix and other TikTokers. Carlos Bond. Thank you, Mr. Bond. Oh, hey, TikTokers. YouTubers, just hang on for another minute, YouTubers. As you know, wait for the TikTokers to come flowing in, although usually I was just describing you all as being like flying monkeys. You sort of arrive 1,000 of you within the first 60 seconds. So Anyway, welcome everybody. Yeah, TikTokers already fleeing in. All right, so I will explain how we normally do this for the TikTokers and the YouTubers and everybody else. My name is John Aravosis. I'm coming to you live from Chicago for the next few weeks, but normally live from Washington, D.C. I do a daily Ukraine update where I give you the latest news, tell you why it matters, and then we do question and answer at the end. On TikTok, you can submit your questions for me via the Q&A link that is in my profile. For the rest of you, use the boxes at the bottom. I am independent media. I'm doing this for free. The only pay I get is your love and adoration and also the gifts you provide. So on TikTok, please do keep them coming. I appreciate the gifts. And on YouTube and elsewhere, the super chats and the super everything else. So let me dive right in. Actually, we'll skip Kanye. There's a Kanye story, but maybe we'll save it for the very end. So Russia, a new wave of missile attacks across Ukraine today, continuing Russia's streak. Thank you, Cecil, for those, and Annie. I was going to say, I'm sorry, I almost forgot. The best way you guys can help me on TikTok is following me. Please do click the follow button right now. Same thing on YouTube and all the rest of you. So thank you. Inspired woman, that was sweet of you. Oh, it's got a little cheering to it too. Ooh, thank you for that. Well, I saw that one and I asked for it because it's a Thanksgiving special thing that they've got on TikTok that I hadn't seen before. Thank you for that. That was sweet of you. So anyway, missile attacks across Ukraine again. As usual, the Russians have been attacking all the infrastructure, mostly electricity, mostly water. They knocked out most of the water and power to the country today. As of about an hour ago, 80% of the country was still without power and still without water. What Ukraine has been doing to try to compensate for power overall has been having rolling blackouts, anywhere between 4 and 12 hours a day. Thank you, Al, for that. Between 4 and 12 hours a day, they've been having to turn off the power so they can basically turn it on in another neighborhood. The worst attack of the day was the news out of Zaporizhia, the Zaporizhia area. Zaporizhia is a free Ukrainian town here in southern Ukraine. The region of Zaporizhia is maybe 50% occupied by the Russians. Zaporizhia, the capital itself, is free. In the region of Zaporizhia, the Russians have had repeated missile attacks again against civilians, not surprisingly. Thank you for that, Aquilimus. The newborn... it's a horrible story. It's like, I don't even know how to tell you the story. Basically, newborn baby, 2 days old, is dead in Ukraine. Thank you, Louis, for that. Baby was born 2 days ago. The Russians attacked a maternity hospital today. You'll recall they did this once before in Mariupol, a city in the south. Further south is Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia is up here. Mariupol is down here. The Russians previously, remember, they attacked that maternity hospital, and the woman that was being carted out on the they were carrying her out on a stretcher, and she was still pregnant, lost the baby. The woman died her as well. Well, this time, 2-day-old baby in the maternity hospital with its mother and the doctor on the second floor of the hospital. The Russians' missiles come in, destroy the entire building. They were able to dig the woman out, the doctor out, but the baby died. And the grandmother, the mother of the woman, was on TV talking about it and saying, the woman just is inconsolable, which you can imagine. Really horrible. And as I said, this is the second time that the Russians have attacked a maternity hospital. And, the Russians, first of all, the Russians don't try to defend themselves. They have a policy of going after civilians. This is actually, I probably have said this before, this is an aspect of Russian war making. They go after civilians. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand in war, is that, yes, in wartime, civilians die. That happens. And sometimes a lot of civilians die. But most civilized, I would say every civilized country in the world, doesn't intentionally target civilians. They don't say, let's blow up a hospital to kill as many innocent people as possible. The Russians do. And this is part of Russian war-making strategy. They did it in Syria. They've done it repeatedly throughout history. It is part of their doctrine to kill civilians in order to, they think, break the spirit of the country they're going after. And again, I raise this point, thank you, Frank, for that, because it's really important to remember. You'll hear people talk about, the civilians that died in Iraq with the American war. And of course, I'm not going to defend George Bush lying his way into Iraq, but the American government didn't sit there and say, you know what, let's kill a bunch of civilians. Wouldn't that be great? That is literally what the Russians are doing in this war, and it is what the Russians have done in every war. Anyway, just wanted to mention that. It just sickens me that this is sort of ongoing. Now, this sort of raises the larger question for me as far as, what price are we making Putin pay for this? And it really worries me because, granted, there is always the aspect in policymaking, and I have worked in politics for 30 years. I mean, my first political job, 1989, out of law school and graduate school, working in the U.S. Senate as a lawyer for a senator. So I've had a lot of political experience. And what I'm not understanding here is, the reason I was bringing that up about my experience was, you don't know what you don't know. So I am very critical of Biden in some ways, because I do think President Biden has done an amazing job bringing this international coalition together and really holding them together. And not just Biden. I mean, Boris Johnson in the UK overall. The Swiss did step up for a while. The French stepped up. The Germans are trying to step up. The Baltic states really stepped up. Poland stepped up. I mean, you have a lot of countries, Norway, a lot of countries, Sweden and Finland now, right? A lot of countries that have really stepped up. Japan helped a lot as well. So it's not just the US, but Biden's done a great job. But I am critical of the fact that I worry that we are not making Putin pay a price for each incremental war crime he does. So, for example, today he goes after a maternity hospital. He has been blowing up for weeks now, blowing up Ukrainian electricity and Ukrainian water to literally freeze people to death over the winter. Okay, that is his goal. Thank you, Truthful. And what price are we, and I say incremental price, okay, because we've got the sanctions, and the sanctions are making the Russians pay a price. But what is the incremental price? And what I mean is, I believe this is the way I approach foreign policy and policymaking. You've got to have an incentive structure. It's economics, really, but it's an incentive structure, and basically say, okay, Putin, if you're going to up the ante and you're going to now have a policy of literally trying to kill civilians over the winter by freezing them to death across the entire country and putting the lives of 43 million, Ukrainians at risk, then we are going to up the ante in terms of the pressure we put on you. And none of this, another sanction here or there. I feel like every time we hear about the sanctions, it's just sort of one more little thing we do, right? We should be saying, you know what? You don't want those long-range weapons, those long-range missiles going to Ukraine for the HIMARS. We're going to do it. If you don't stop immediately stop blowing up civilian facilities, we're going to provide the HIMARS rockets. And next, we're going to provide tanks, those American tanks that you don't want going. We're going to provide those too. But you've got to make an incentive. And my final point here of saying, like, my background in politics, you don't know what you don't know. We don't know what Biden might be doing behind the scenes that maybe somehow is ratcheting up pressure on Putin, right? And we just don't hear about it. But it worries me that there's, other than a nuclear bomb, a chemical weapon, or a biological weapon. We hear about that. We hear about if Putin does that, all hell is going to come down on him. So Putin knows the price. But is there any price for Putin becoming more and more vicious just short of a nuclear bomb? I'm not sure there is. Anyway, just my 2 cents on that, because it's been worrying me a lot. Just to remind you guys, I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. Thank you for joining me tonight. I see we've got more TikTok people than we did last night. I was thinking the holiday was taking you all away, so thanks for joining us. This is my nightly show where basically I take the first half hour or so, maybe a little bit less, of just summarizing the news of the day that I think is important and why I think it matters. And then we spend the second half of the show talking about, thank you, Eddie, talking about your questions and your comments as well. Okay. And the way you submit the questions on TikTok, use the Q&A link that is in my profile. The rest of you obviously use the comments at the bottom. Thank you for those gifts. I was just going to say, this is independent media. The best way you guys can help me is to subscribe on TikTok right now. Hit that follow button. Hit it right now. I want to see them on the screen. Please do follow me. Please do subscribe on YouTube and elsewhere, and keep the gifts coming, the super chats, the gifts on TikTok. They help support my work, because literally, you guys are the only ones paying me to do this. So let me keep diving ahead right now. Really interesting guy, Michael Clark, who's a defense analyst who's on Sky News a lot. Thank you, Eddie, for that. He's on Sky News a lot in the UK, and very interesting, smart guy. Two different segments he did today that I wanted to talk to you guys about. The first was about winter in Ukraine. Now, this one is interesting because we had talked, I think yesterday or the day before, we were talking about, actually, not just the last couple of days, but anybody who's watched my broadcast before, we routinely talk about what will winter mean to the fight, right, in Ukraine, and how much will it affect the Russians versus the Ukrainians, right, this sort of back and forth. Let me see here. Actually, you know what, Rachel? I'll do Rachel's question real quick because it just popped in, and then I'm going to continue because the Michael Clark stuff. There's two sort of big sections I want to talk about. One is about winter and how it's going to affect the Russians, and the second is about some new helicopters the Brits are providing the Ukrainians that are actually really interesting. But let's see Rachel's question first. Why won't the UN or NATO name it as what it is, a genocide? They're killing newborns, pregnant mothers, stealing kids, and trying to destroy and erase their culture. Actually, they have, Rachel. The question is, so what? I mean, they've said it. Even Biden for a while there was kind of hedging and saying, excuse me, I'm trying to remember with Biden whether it was war crimes or genocide, but he was hedging on it, and finally he came out. A lot of them have been calling it genocide, but not everybody. I think it has been more, my guess from what I remember, because this has been a while now, I think it's been Poland. I think it's been the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. But the rest of them aren't. My suspicion is part of the reason is this notion of the more we demonize Putin, the more it's going to push. No, this is not my argument, but I think this is Biden and the world leaders. The more we demonize Putin, the more it puts him in a corner, and the harder it makes it for us to finally reach a deal with him in the end. Because in the end, people are going to say, well, you said it was genocide. How can we reach a compromise with genocide, right? He has to be removed from power. So I think my guess is, thank you, Tattooed. My guess is that that's the analysis going on. My bigger concern isn't the nomenclature we're using. My bigger concern is, again, what additional price are we making Putin pay for doing this? And I think we have to keep making him pay an additional price so that each time we go, okay, right? You bombed a maternity hospital, that crossed the line. We're now going to provide some longer range rockets, to the Ukrainians, something like that, right? All right, let me go on. So back to Michael again. Thank you again, Rachel, for that. I appreciate that. So Michael Clark, a big defense analyst. He's on Sky News. He's talking first about winter. Thank you, thank you, Gordon, for that. Let me just read you his analysis and what he was saying about winter in Ukraine and how it's going to affect the Russians and the Ukrainians. This is now the beginning of winter in Ukraine, and temperatures can go to normally, say, 3 or 4 degrees centigrade below freezing. That's 25 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. Okay, during the day. But if there's an anticyclone in Siberia, thank you, T-Man, which doesn't happen every year, but it does happen, the temperatures will go to negative 20 C or negative 4 Fahrenheit. Okay, and that's life-threatening. And we're not talking the wind chill. We're talking about the actual daily temperature. So the temperature can drop significantly more if there's this thing called an anticyclone in Siberia. I think they don't know yet whether one's going to happen. He says those temperatures are life-threatening. My guess is if it did get that cold, this is Michael Clark, an awful lot of Russian troops will probably freeze to death in the trenches because their winter gear is terrible, whereas the winter gear of the Ukrainians have got is much, much better now because it's Western gear. So that's an interesting point. I would go one step further, which is obviously if you get to 4 below Fahrenheit, and I mean, I'm from Chicago, 4 below Fahrenheit, or what did we say for you guys? It's negative 20 C. That's horrific. I mean, thank you, Nikki. It ain't fun going outside when it's 4 below Fahrenheit. I mean, I've had to take my dog out of that weather, and I mean, it's horrific. I can't even imagine being stuck in a trench, like he says. But even what was the other temperature we said? 25 degrees Fahrenheit, or let's say negative 4 for Celsius for you guys. 25 Fahrenheit. It's cold. You don't want to be out there for 4 hours, for 6 hours, for 8 hours. A lot of these guys have nowhere to go at night, right? They're having to either sleep in their vehicles, and when they turn the vehicles on, first of all, they're using gasoline, they're using diesel fuel that needs to be refueled, but also they're heating up the vehicle and providing a wonderful target for drones to find and basically have artillery blow them up. So I think the Russians are going to have a real problem this winter because they're not going to get, because we know they don't have the kind of clothing they need. Thank you, Jay Waldman, for that. The other thing he gets into, this is really interesting. Okay, helicopters. The Brits have been training the Ukrainians on how to use these new helicopters called Sea King helicopters. They've been training them for 6 weeks. And this was really funny. So the BBC, I've got two competing stories here. First, the BBC. The BBC says, in the last 6 weeks, Ukrainian crews were trained in the UK to fly and maintain the aircraft to provide search and rescue capabilities. Okay, so they're just 3 helicopters for search and rescue. Now, mind you, what is actually really significant here, and this is a case of, I think, where you see the Brits actually upping the ante, which is something I've been saying I wish the Americans would do. These are the first aircraft, manned aircraft, not the drones, but the first manned aircraft that have been provided to Ukraine. So this is a big deal. Okay, this is a very big deal from the Brits. But notice what the BBC says. The UK troops were trained to provide search and rescue capabilities with these aircraft. Well, Michael Clark weighs in, the defense analyst, and says on Sky News, the Sea King helicopters were used by the Royal Navy as anti-submarine helicopters. Thank you, DFK. And the fact that the Ukrainian crews have had 6 weeks of training, this is Clark I'm quoting right now, 6 weeks of training suggests they don't need to be trained to fly a helicopter, but need 6 weeks of training on the equipment used for anti-submarine warfare. The only thing the Russians can really do safely, he's talking now about the area off of Sevastopol. Okay, give you a little bit more background on what's going on in terms of the Russian military, the Russian Navy, okay? So the Russians invaded in 2014 and stole Crimea, Ukrainian territory right here. They've got a naval base in Sevastopol, major naval base for the Russians, okay? Well, the Russian ships were operating around here, and then the Ukrainians started blowing them up and causing big trouble for Moose and Squirrel. So the Russians, remember the Russian flagship, the Moskva, that got sunk by the Ukrainian torpedo? Well, or the Ukrainian cruise missile, I think it was. So the Russian ships, as a result of that, pulled back significantly, okay? Well, as a result, They're now have basically it's considered not safe for any Russian ships to be around here except submarines. So the Russians have now been using a ton of submarines in this area. That's the background for what I'm going to read to you next from Michael Clark, the defense analyst in Britain. So the only thing, oh, thank you. Thank you, Louis. That's cute. The only thing the Russians can really do safely in the area off of Sevastopol, which I was just showing you, is to use their submarines, of which they have quite a few in their Black Sea fleet. So my understanding is that these helicopters will probably be used for anti-submarine warfare over the Black Sea. So what the Brits appear to be doing is they're not giving 3 helicopters to the Ukrainians to do search and rescue. They're giving 3 helicopters to the Ukrainians to, oh, thank you, Flower Lady. It's so much more fun having the volume on my iPad so I can hear this stuff. Oh, the wave. I just got a very generous whale over on TikTok. And if you haven't been on TikTok, you got to kind of witness it to appreciate it. I know everyone, it's always a crowd pleaser too, because there's such these beautiful designed images that come out of the screen. It's really pretty cool. Thank you for that. Yeah, whale count 1. Yes, let's see if we can have a 3 whale day. So anyway, that's really interesting. That was why I told you the story about the Brits sending these 3 helicopters to the Ukrainians, because it looks like they're being sent to blow up submarines, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So that's great. Quick little reset. I am John Aravosis. You're listening to the Aravosis Report. This is my daily show about the latest news from Ukraine, where I tell you the news that I think matters. And then for the last half hour, we will talk, we'll do question and answer on TikTok. Submit your questions via the Q&A link you find in my profile. For the rest of you, you can use the question box at the bottom. Please do the gifts. I appreciate the gifts very much on TikTok. I am independent media. No one is actually paying me to do these broadcasts that I started right. Oh, thank you, Patty. Thank you, Pat. Oh, my TV is going on. Thank you, Patty. That was sweet of you. But yes, I was just going to say those gifts make a big difference because they're a lot of fun, but also it's really generous and it helps me keep the work going. So thank you guys. All right. And do subscribe. Everybody subscribe, hit the button right now to follow me. So, that's a big deal. Boris Johnson made some news today. Boris Johnson, you probably recall, is the outgoing, he already has outgone, Prime Minister of Britain. And Johnson, a big supporter of Ukraine. I mean, big. I would say in his own way, and even, thank you, Blue Sky, in his own way, an even bigger supporter of Ukraine than Biden. I mean, the U.S. obviously has put forth a tremendous amount of weapons and money. But in terms of really being out there, I would say Johnson has been further out there than we have as far as being like, boom, let's take it to the Russians. Now, Johnson said today, which is actually speaking a little out of turn, which I thought was interesting, that going into the war, in those days before the Russian invasion, the Russians invaded February 24th, I think it was. And the days before, remember, we weren't sure. The Americans, Joe Biden kept saying that the Russians were going to invade. The Ukrainians were, Zelensky was like, I don't think so. The French, remember, President Macron of France just kept getting on the phone with Putin as though he was going to stop Putin somehow from invading. Well, Johnson says that the French were simply naive. They just were in denial. They thought the war wasn't going to happen. The Germans thought the war was going to happen, and the Germans felt like, you know what? Let's just get it over with. Let's not help Ukraine. If they're going to invade, let's just have a quick war, let the Russians win. And it sounds really bad what he says, and the Germans denied it. The more I thought about it, I'm pretty critical of the Germans on my show, because I do think the German people are fine, but the German government under Chancellor Scholz has been, I think he lies a lot about his support for Ukraine. He makes a lot of promises and then doesn't come through. But I will defend the Germans on this. All of us thought that Ukraine was going to lose, and we thought Ukraine was going to lose in 3 days. I mean, or a week, right? We thought the Russians were to come in, take over the country, gone. Zelensky would be gone, right? Remember the U.S., remember Biden? Biden offered to get Zelensky out of there. And so remember Zelensky said, I don't need a ride. What did he say? I don't need a ride. I need ammo. I think he said something like that. I need weapons. Thank you, Comfort, for that. So if the Germans were simply saying, look, the Russians are coming in, they're going to take the country in 3 days. Why are we talking about how we're going to support Ukraine? We can't support. I need ammo. That's what he said. Yeah. We can't support them. it's not going to work. We've already admitted it. So let's just get it over with. I don't want to defend the Germans totally, but I'd like to know more about the quote, because I'm sure our government as well said, what are we going to do? The Russians are going to win in 3 days. Now, my suspicion is our government said, well, we need to prepare for a guerrilla war, is my thought. Because I was thinking that, and, I'm not Joe Biden. He's got better advisors than I've got. I'm sure our government was thinking of a guerrilla war. How are we going to provide enough weapons to the Ukrainians under occupation to fight back? And the Germans, at least according to what Johnson is saying, were simply kind of like, we do a lot of business with Russia. That's right. They provide, Mark Body is saying the Germans sent 3,000 helmets. I remember that. Remember that at the beginning of the war, we were maybe actually, it might have been 5,000 or 15,000. But I remember at the beginning of the war, we were all like, the Germans sent like a couple helmets. Whatever, the Germans. Oh, you Germans. We do like the German people, though. Russia launched a cyber attack today on the European Parliament after the Parliament overwhelmingly declared Russia a state sponsor of terror. Now, this was, Kremlin-linked people that launched the cyber attack, apparently a very major cyber attack. And it seems... I don't want to say the Russians got away with it, because we really don't know what was done in response. I mean, it's very possible, I think maybe even very likely, that the U.S. or a European country in this case responded by maybe taking out some Russian systems as well to say, you know what, you come after us, we're coming after you. Now, I looked a little bit more into this to see what it means, because in American law, it means something if Russia is determined to be a state sponsor of terror. Certain sanctions kick in and all sorts of legal implications kick in as far as lawsuits and what happens to the money we've seized from them, all sorts of things. So I was wondering in the EU if that exists. It doesn't exist yet. What I found was that the European Union cannot currently designate states as sponsors of terrorism, but the European Parliament, the bloc's only directed election institution, so it's the elected institution of the European Union, the European Parliament, said in a statement that it was calling for Brussels, meaning the European Union, and the 27 member states to consider putting in place the proper legal framework to do so and to add Russia to such a list. So in other words, the European Parliament was making a symbolic statement that Russia was a terror state, and then calling on the European Union to set up a legal structure or something. I always forget, is that what's in Strasbourg? Okay, it's funny, I went to Strasbourg to see it. We're talking back in like 1989 or so. But they're asking them, the European Parliament wants the European Union to put the legal structures in place to be able to label countries as official sponsors of terror and to have certain legal implications kick in when that happens. Currently, it doesn't. Russia, actually, last story I'll do, and then we'll get to the Q&A. This was good. We did about a half hour of this. And then the second half hour, like I said, for folks, if you're new here, the second half hour, we do question and answer all about Ukraine, what's going on. I also like your guys' opinion. So it could just be comments from you as to what's going on. Russia is tightening its anti-LGBT laws against gay and trans people in the country. Russia, horrifically bad. Now, I say this from a country where not always so good here, right? We had a massacre the other day. But as far as state-sponsored homophobia, Russia really, okay. I don't even know if it's as bad. I was going to say maybe not as bad as Qatar, but actually it might be, or Qatar. I was taught to call it Qatar, the official pronunciation, but Qatar, where they're doing the soccer match. But Russia's always been really bad. 2013, Russia, this is via Sky News, Russia passed a gay propaganda to minors law that banned anybody from presenting gay as being, or trans as being okay in any way that might influence minors, right? Well, it covered film, literature, journalism, advertising. Apparently, they're now expanding that law to what is this? They're expanding the law to cover all age groups, which is a little weird because it doesn't really meaning if you are telling any audience now, not just young people, that being gay is okay, you'll go to prison, massive fines, etc. I don't think there's much of a difference here because previously, for example, I remember back in 2013 when they passed the law, some Russian journalists got in trouble because I remember the Russian journalist was defending someone in the paper. There was somebody accused of a crime, they were gay or whatever it was, and basically reported the story that the person wasn't guilty or whatever. And they came down on him and said, "Oh, you're making gay people look good, and that's illegal." So this whole notion of it going after kids or not kids is BS. What is interesting to me, and the reason I brought up this story, is that Putin is starting to fall back on some of his old go-to issues. And to me, that suggests, again, the war ain't going so well. Yeah, no reruns of Glee in Russia, that the war isn't going very well if Putin is having to fall back on the old, the old bigotry and the racism. They go after Jews, they go after gays, they go after trans people. It's the usual. They don't like blacks either, actually. All right, guys, let's see. I will do a quick reset and then we'll do your questions. I am John Aravosis. You're watching the Aravosis Report. Actually, hold on one second here. Okay, I think somebody already got them. I was going to say, hold on a moment here. Oh, I can't do that. Yes, I can do that. One moment. Never mind. Any case, I am John Aravosis, I was trying to see a comment that was on TikTok. The Aravosis Report. This is my daily show updating you on what's going on in Ukraine. We've now done the news section of the show, and now we're doing question and answer on TikTok. Submit your questions via the Q&A link in my profile on YouTube. I do both at the same time. You can use the question box at the bottom. Super chat and super whatevers. Stickers are very welcome. Your gifts are very welcome on TikTok as well, because this is independent media. Nobody pays me to do this except you guys, so I appreciate you supporting me in this. And tomorrow's show we are skipping because it's a holiday here in America. It's Thanksgiving, one of the, I would argue, two biggest holidays of the year, really. Easter as well. But I would say Thanksgiving is probably second to Christmas here. So I will not be doing a show, but I will be back on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, US. All right, let's, and I was going to take it too. I've got a Discord. I'm probably not going to go to the Discord tonight. We'll see. But I've got a Discord as well. Do check that out. It's discord.aravosis.com. We've got a lot of cool auctions. I've got a Zelensky, the shirts that Zelensky wears, the green combat shirts. I found the supplier and we bought several of those. I've got the Azov style bracelets made from the steel, and a couple really cool military patches. So go check out the Discord. Overall, if you want to check out my work in general, support me, Patreon, Discord. I've got a store set up with, by the way, t-shirts. This is one of my t-shirts with the Ukrainian trident. My store, you can find all of that at aravosis.com. That's my link tree. For you guys on TikTok, just go to my profile. On my profile, the link in my profile is the link to my link tree. You'll find everything linked there. Thank you, loyalty. For the rest of you, just go to aravosis.com and you will find, hang on here. Oh, thank you for that. That hot dog is quite generous, as I recall. Thank you. The one thing I will say, and I apologize in advance, just putting the link here for the folks on TikTok, the creators, we don't always know what is sort of which gifts, because some of the gifts are like crazy expensive, and we don't always know because it doesn't show us what you guys have spent. So I apologize if I don't always react as loudly to some of the more expensive gifts, because I don't always know. So I apologize for that. But I remember that hot dog being a very generous gift. That's why I'm saying it. So thank you for that. All right, guys, let me go to the Q&A. So I will start right now. 1 second here. TikTok. Go to the Q&A link in my profile. Boom. In Alaska, the Air Force had long johns, pants, shirt, parka liners, parka, fat boy boots, fur hat, and face masks. Does Ukraine have the minimum such as this? What I know Ukraine has is NATO has provided a bunch of winter gear overall. And I even think there might have been, was it something recently? Didn't a NATO country provide some winter weather gear very, very recently? I thought there was. But in any case, as Michael Clark was saying, the defense analyst, the point is that Ukraine, Canada, okay, there you go. Maybe it was Canada then. Yeah, there was something, just Norway too. Okay, there was something recent. But Canada was what I was thinking of, but maybe Norway did too. Yeah, Canada, just in the last couple of days, provided some stuff. But basically, NATO, Japan is sending generators. The world has gotten together to make sure that Ukraine's got the right clothes. Now, actually, funny point here. One of the interesting translations of the intercepts of Russian communications, there's the Russians really stupidly use open communications with their military. Thank you, Marianne. Appreciate it. The Russians use these open communications, and the Ukrainians, thank you, Cheryl, have been listening in. Now, it may be the Germans, it may be the Norwegians. I mean, it may not just be the Ukrainians, but the Brits. But somebody's listening in. They're translating the Russian communications. And one of the things the Russians were saying earlier in the war, and these are Russian troops in Ukraine, and the guys are saying, he goes, these freaking Ukrainians. He goes, he's talking to the wife, and he's talking about he goes, remember the gloves we bought? And he's saying how much he spent on the gloves. And he goes, remember, we had to go to the store and we paid, I forget how much it was in rubles, some horrific price. He goes, it might have even been like the equivalent of $30 or $40. It was a lot. And he goes, the Ukrainians get that from the military. They give it to them. He goes, the winter socks, because he had to buy winter socks. He goes, again, they've got them. And he goes, the jackets even have the NATO insignia inside of it or something. And he's jealous as hell. He goes, they've got winter coats. He goes, they've got NATO winter coats. And this poor guy was talking about having to go shopping with his wife and all the money they had to spend out of their own pocket because the Russian military wasn't giving them anything. Now, Ukrainians can always use more. We've been raising money for the Ukrainians too. So it's every military in this case can use more, but the Russians particularly bad. What they're giving them is awful. They're not giving them a lot. And NATO has made sure. Now, -50 wind chill for the week for last year. Now that could have been, if you're talking about Ukraine, that could have been, they were saying this anti-cyclone in Siberia can hit, and that can cause massively cold temperatures across the region. So it depends, but yeah, no, the temperatures could kill the Russians. I mean, it's really bad. And mind you, these guys are stuck in trenches, and the Ukrainians can go into people's homes. I mean, basically, I don't know, the Russians also go into people's homes and, squat, but the Ukrainians can go there and actually have sympathetic neighbors to help them out. Marion is amazing, actually. I still want to get her on the show someday. Let me look here. Sorry, just looking for more questions, like a polar vortex here. Yep. Let me pull this up. Oh, thank you. Somebody called GASN Performance just gave me a PayPal gift. Thank you for that. Sorry, I was looking for the questions on my phone and my PayPal notice popped up. Thank you for that. That was sweet of you. Let me see here. Why don't I do a segment on Iran? I can. I've done it before. My only concern is I don't know that I could carry a whole show about Iran myself. I have had guests before. I had a really good guest a couple months ago. I wouldn't object to it. Yeah, I can get somebody to come back again and talk about Iran. No, I'll try to in the next couple of weeks. I can try to do it because I would absolutely do it. I care a lot about that issue. I know it's not Ukraine, but what about North Korea? North Korea is bad. I mean, the thing I say about North Korea is we keep talking as if Putin's crazy. Putin's not crazy. The problem is North Korea is crazy, right? They're nuts. I mean, they're nuts. Putin's not nuts. It's bad. I just don't, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what to tell you there. I do not have the solution to North Korea. They're a nuclear power and they're crazy. We are doing this. Somebody just got on here. Have you already updated on Ukraine? I have already updated on Ukraine, but now we're doing the question and answer, which still lets me get into a lot of different issues anyway, surrounding Ukraine. So hang out. I'll be hanging out till the hour. So another 22 minutes. I'm going to look here and see what questions you guys are throwing here. I do not know anything about minorities in Transcarpathia. I only learned about Transcarpathia because my friend Vlad is living there. The Air Forces report will continue after this war ends. Hopefully it ends well, but I will transfer this into being a more general news show. Absolutely. How did we all just forget about the missiles that hit NATO? Well, it depends what you mean. I mean, the missiles that hit are still being investigated. NATO seems to believe, sorry, my hair is like exploding here. This is what happens when your hair starts to go gray. You get little bits sticking out when you're looking in the camera. NATO, who was it? The Poles, the Americans have all said they believe the rockets that hit Poland were Ukrainian. The Ukrainians have said they don't think it is. The polls are still investigating, and they've not released any information yet about it. So we're not talking about it because there's no other information, but NATO seems convinced that the missiles did not come from Russia, so NATO is not taking it as a threat, basically. Caleb is saying a report about, I think he means North Korea, sending troops to Ukraine. North Korea had talked about, there was a weird story that was only in, I will call it the lesser media. You know what I mean? Like it was on kind of some of the British tabloids and weird stuff like that, saying that the North Koreans had said they're willing to send like 100,000 men to Ukraine to fight for the Russians. And we never really heard anything more about it. So I'm not convinced that story's real. I'm just not convinced. Craig, do you think Britain supplying the helicopters to Ukraine may inspire Biden to supply something similar? Well, I would hope so. I think we had talked about this earlier, just to update folks. The Brits just had the Ukrainian troops come over, trained for 6 weeks on how to use Sea King helicopters. I think that's what they're called. And the BBC was reporting that the helicopters are for search and rescue. Well, I always forget his name. Is it Michael Tracy? Michael Clark. Okay, Michael Tracy's the crazy guy. Yeah, Michael Clark, British defense analyst. I think he's British, but defense analyst in the UK, says that actually he believes the Ukrainians were trained not for search and rescue, but how to use the helicopters to find and destroy Russian submarines. That's huge. I mean, because the Ukrainians have done such an effective job at going after Russian ships, and you know that they've sunk multiple Russian ships, the Russians really they've had to pull back their ships. Thank you, dear Benji. I appreciate that. The Russians have had to pull back their ships, and they can only use, thank you, Rod, they can only use submarines closer to Ukraine. We're talking in this area here, okay? In this area here, the Russians could pretty much only be able to use their submarines. Well, with these new helicopters the Brits are providing, the Ukrainians very likely could destroy some Russian submarines, which would, I mean, that's a lot of men. I'm trying to remember, is it like 100 men or something on a submarine? I'm forgetting my detail. I'm thinking back to the Kursk accident. Wasn't it like 100 or so? It's a lot of men. It's a lot of machine for that thing to blow up and go to the bottom of the sea. So this is a big deal. Now, it's the first aircraft that anyone has provided Ukraine. So it's a big deal in that regard. I think eventually it will help. The question is, will this maybe inspire Biden to do something similar? Thank you, Mags. What I was going to do is explain to you the Overton window. Overton window is a concept. I don't know if it's just political science or not, but we use it in political science. Thank you, Mags. Of basically saying that I'll call the Overton window the window of the possible, the window of the likely, right? And the Overton window of what is going to be sent to Ukraine did not include planes. Right? Remember, we said, oh, we can't include planes. Putin would see that as an offense. Putin would see that as escalation. And as Biden said, World War III, right? Well, the fact that the Brits are now sending helicopters, they're not sending planes, but they're sending helicopters, right? As somebody just said, as Daniel O'Neill just said, a first complete aircraft. That has expanded the Overton window just a bit. It's still not airplanes, but it is aircraft. Right? So all of a sudden, that window of the likely just got a little bit bigger, and it'll get even bigger based on what Putin does in return, right? Will Putin respond in some horrific way? Thank you, Paper Crane. Or will Putin just do what he always does and just keep bombing the poor Ukrainians? Well, if Putin doesn't do anything new in response to this, then it means the Brits got away with it. It means what President Biden has been saying of, oh, we better not give, these aircraft because Putin will go crazy and who knows what he'll do. if the Brits get away with it, it means, hey, maybe we can provide, not even maybe, we can provide some aircraft. And it isn't, it actually is escalation, but it's escalation where Putin won't respond in a crazy way with nukes or whatever else. So my long story short here is, by the British providing these helicopters, they've expanded the Overton window, the window of what is possible to send to Ukraine. And based on the Russian response, America and others may look and say, you know what? The Brits provided those aircraft, and we were afraid Putin would go nuts. Putin didn't go nuts. So basically, Putin was bluffing again. Thank you, Victoria. Putin was bluffing. So yeah, long story short, that it could make a difference. Yes, very much so. But the Russians, Andy is saying, Putin's scared of the British. There is something with the Russians and the British, and I don't know what the heck it is, but God, they hate the Brits. And I mean, this has been going on now for maybe more than several months, but the Russians have been trying to demonize the Brits as though like they're the ones behind everything. Remember, they were claiming for a while there that the Brits were providing nuclear fuel to the Ukrainians that they were going to use in dirty bombs and this kind of crazy stuff. They just hate that. And they keep talking about how they're going to nuke the UK, which of course they won't do because, got news for you, the Brits have nukes. And the Brits don't just have nukes. The Brits have nukes in nuclear submarines. And submarines are very, 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 nuclear submarines especially, very, very difficult to find. There's no way the Russians are going to find the British nuclear submarines. So that if Russia were to nuke Britain, Britain would nuke them back. But also, if Russia were to nuke Britain, America would nuke Russia back. Thank you, Al. So that Russia's never going to nuke Britain. But the point here is they're just, the Russians just have something about the Brits that drives them crazy. That just drives them crazy. Now, mind you, the Brits are very, they're very good with the, with the bon mot, with their little wit and their cutting whatever. And it just, I don't know. Putin's scared. Craig is saying Putin is scared of one day waking up to an SAS team of Bin Laden Navy SEAL style. Yeah, that British special forces are going to come in and get him. A lot of you are weighing in on this. This is interesting. Otan Bat is saying HMS Queen Elizabeth completed one of the narrowest harbor entries in her lifetime as she arrived in Oslo after F-35B flying operations in the North Sea. Did that just happen? I heard the UK was taking a lot of Russian money before the war. That's true, but are no longer receiving any benefits. There was basically the Russians came in and bought up a lot of London. At least I know. I'm not the expert on this, but I know a lot of the when we say the oligarchs, we mean the sort of corrupt Russian billionaires that spent a lot of money in the UK. And I know us over here in America, people were not happy that the British government was letting the Russians do this. And what do you know? It seems we were right. Kind of a problem. But let me say this though. I will say this. Impressive how good the British government has been on Ukraine, considering, at least at the beginning, I think there was a concern that there was so much Russian money in London. Would it somehow co-opt what the Brits could do? And it didn't. It really didn't. So kudos to the Brits for that. It's the British women. Yes, you drive the Russians mad. Submarines, a good question. Pod is asking, what can a submarine be used for in a land war? What they're doing with the submarines, for start, a couple different things. One, they're stopping the Ukrainians from using their ships for anything, for starters. And finally, there was this grain deal that is now allowing the Ukrainians to export grain via a couple different ports around here. Okay. The Russian submarines stopped that from February to July of this year. There were no grain going out. There were no Ukrainian ships even really going out. Okay. So that's what submarines can do. It can stop. So in this case, the Ukrainians were not able to export grain. They were not able to make money. I mean, it was a lot of money coming into the Ukrainian government because grain is one of their top, probably is their top export, but Ukraine is also one of the biggest grain exporters in the world. The other thing submarines can do is some of these missiles that are hitting the Ukraine are coming from Russian submarines. So you actually have missiles. For example, we know you can have ICBMs, but what would you call them? SSBNs, but ballistic missiles on nuclear submarines, nuclear missiles. The Russians aren't using those, which is good. Submarines can also have cruise missiles. And the cruise missiles, anyway, bottom line is they've been shooting missiles off the submarines that have been attacking the land. So they are useful. But they're also useful for, as I said, stopping the Ukrainians from being able to do any kind of significant. Okay, Bruce just said the same thing. Submarines also launch cruise missiles, exactly. And sunflower oil as well. Yes. The Ukrainians export a lot of sunflower oil too. Let me look here at another question. I will do a quick reset. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. This is my nightly show where we talk about Ukraine and the latest news there. And this is the second half of the show where we take your questions and answer. I say we, me and my dog, where I take your questions and hopefully answer them, but also your comments too. I'm happy as you guys are weighing in right now. I like when people give feedback and also just like your own take on what you think is going on. So feel free to do that too. We got a good additional 10 minutes here. I was getting Vincent is asking my story about Kanye. Really just quick, and then we'll go back to the news here. But I just saw a picture of Kanye West is arriving in Miami in the airport. Apparently he's going to meet Trump, and he's coming out of the gate, and there is video, and this came from, hang on a second. This is a trusted source. It's from, whatchamacallit, hang on. Right Wing Watch, which is a project of the Southern Poverty Law Center and the People for the American Way. So People for the American Way in Washington, D.C. sent out a video that is showing Kanye West getting out of the plane in Mar-a-Lago. I'm going to show you this. There is a guy standing next to Kanye in blue. The guy in the sunglasses in the blue at the end, next to Kanye, that is reportedly Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes. First of all, Right Wing Watch says it's Nick Fuentes. I'm in Miami. I'm going to believe them. He and Kanye are walking side by side. They're not talking. Is it possible that Nick Fuentes and Kanye don't know each other and coincidentally are getting off next to each other? It's possible they're walking side by side off the plane and don't know each other. Nick Fuentes is one of the most virulent anti-Semitic white supremacists in the United States. Now, I get very annoyed with people who use the word white supremacy to mean all kinds of racism. We got about 7 minutes left, so I don't mind doing a quick tangent here. It's become popular by younger folks to use white supremacy to mean all racism, right? And America's white supremacy and everything. Instead of racism, they call it white supremacy. I get it. It bristles, and I think it's stupid. Here's the reason. The word white supremacy used to mean people wearing those white cone hats. The Ku Klux Klan were white supremacists, right? Racism was bad, but it wasn't the Ku Klux Klan. In any case, Nick Fuentes is a white supremacist. He's not just a racist. This guy has this regular show. It's not on YouTube because YouTube wouldn't have it. I've watched this guy's show. Very personable, 23-year-old, wears a little suit and tie like Mr. Preppy. He routinely talks, thank you, T-Man. He routinely talks about how the Holocaust isn't real. And he laughs about the Holocaust. First of all, he laughs about Jews being killed and then says it didn't happen, but also jokes about it because he thinks it's funny. The Holocaust is funny. That's how bad this guy is. He's not like, oh, liberals don't like him. He is so bad. He is so racist. He is a white supremacist in the white people are the top of the gene pool and everybody's dirty. It is horrific. I have seen his show because I work in politics, and a lot of people will share the worst of his clips on Twitter to keep people informed of what this guy does. This guy was walking off the plane with Kanye West, according to People for the American Way, which is a very big group here. He was walking off next to Kanye. They were not talking. It's possible it was a coincidence that they were walking side by side and they don't know each other. Really freaking creepy. The final point I'll make is this is the same guy who had a conference several months ago. And at his conference, who do you think? I'm going to pull this up. Who do you think is speaking at his conference that he introduces and then lifts the hand arm in arm with? I'm going to show you. Hang on a second here. Where's their? I can't find. I mean, I can find them with here, but there's a. Yeah. Who do you think that is with Nick Fuentes? That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a Republican member of Congress. She is a super influential, one of the top 3 pro-Donald Trump members of the Republican Party in the House. Very influential right now. She went to this guy's conference, got introduced by him, hand in hand, standing on the stage. Everybody has known who this guy is. He became famous when he was like 18 years old. He's from the Chicago suburbs. This has now been 5 years of this guy's infamy. She knew who he was. Really sick. Oh, and final thing, she tweets today. She retweets somebody who put out a list of people who need to be permitted back on Twitter. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, this Republican congresswoman, retweets it. The list includes Nick Fuentes. This is where this guy comes full circle. David Duke, who's the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Alex Jones and Gavin McInnes, among others, who's the head of the Proud Boys. Anyway, this is why I got wound up right before the show, because that video literally came out of I am telling you, there isn't any of you out there, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, right or left, I can guarantee you there is nobody watching this show today who likes Nick Fuentes. You would all hate this guy. He's so bad. He's not a Republican. He is literally, he would be in jail in Germany. I mean, that's how bad this guy is. And kind of a fan of Hitler too. Really, really, really bad. Really bad. So in any case, yeah, the fact that he was walking off the plane with Kanye, at least according to Right Wing Watch. Now, let's see, right? Maybe Right Wing Watch got it wrong. I don't know. All right. You know what? I will do the summary of the news. I always do a quick summary here of the news, and then we can see if we could maybe do another question or two. I didn't mean to get on the long Kanye tangent, but it was something really bad. And I think it's important because, like I said, Fuentes isn't a Republican or Democratic issue. This guy's, I mean, I just, like I said, he's a Holocaust denier. I mean, he laughs about the Holocaust. It is, Google him and you'll see what I mean. Google Nick Fuentes Holocaust or whatever, and you'll see. He was, God, what was he? I can't even remember what he was doing. I remember one of the shows, he was comparing the Holocaust to a tray of to baking. Oh God. Because one of his arguments is that it's impossible that many Jews were murdered. And he goes, I'm not talking about Jews. Let's talk about cookies. Let's say I'm cooking cookies and I burn my cookies in the oven. I mean, this is the guy's dialogue. I'm not going to go on. It is, that's why I'm saying, like, this is not Republican or Democrat, this guy. If you are a Republican, trust me, you would hate this guy. He is, yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Oh, sorry, Daniel. I did see Daniel put something up here and then I got on my Nick Fuentes rant. Sorry. Hey, Daniel. I'm collecting a Ukrainian family from Dublin Airport later this week. Oh, neat. They're from outside Kyiv, but don't feel safe to stay for the winter. Helping them register and get to their host. Seems many more will leave this winter. They're from outside Kyiv, but I see. They don't feel safe to stay outside Kyiv for the winter. Helping them register and get to their host. Oh, that's nice. Wow. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what the Zelensky government has said, Daniel's in Ireland, in Dublin, what the Zelensky government has said is they haven't been telling people to leave the country per se, but they are telling people to potentially leave the big cities because the Russians are going to go after the big cities first. I mean, that's the place they're going to hit, right? And to go somewhere where you know people, where there's going to be power. Maybe you've got backup generators, right? Maybe your heat is provided by, I don't know, oil, whatever it is. But they're recommending folks get out of the big cities because, that is the Russian strategy. is to try to freeze everybody to death this winter. So that's interesting. Yeah, that people just didn't feel safe and they went to Ireland. Good for you, Daniel. Yeah, I was gonna say anything we can do to help. I doubt there's anything we can do. I assume they've got charities and everything there helping these guys on their own anyway. But wow, yeah, that's very cool, Daniel. Thank you for doing that. Sorry, I did. I even saved your question, but I was in the middle of my rant and then lost it. Yeah, Kanye. Okay, let me go here. So a quick summary of the stories we talked about today. New wave of missile strikes across Ukraine. Power and water were out across the country today. Really horrific story of a newborn baby, only 2 days old, being killed in a Russian missile strike against a maternity hospital in the province of Zaporizhia. The mother survived and her 2-day-old baby was killed. I then talked about, my dog is next to me lying, sleeping under the that's okay, you're right, under the jacket next to me on the chair. We then talked about what price, thank you, Cliff, what price the West is making Putin pay for each of these additional war crimes. And I'm not convinced, I'm not convinced we're making him pay enough of a price. The dog just woke up. Then I talked about winter coming and what winter was going to do. And I quoted Michael Clark, who's a top defense analyst in the UK, talking about how winter is going to be much harder for the Russians than the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians have got NATO gear. So they've got NATO winter clothing. The Russians do not. We then talked about Sea King helicopters, that the Brits have provided 3 helicopters to the Ukrainians and training, but it looks like the helicopters have been provided for anti-submarine warfare, which is a huge deal. If the Ukrainians are now going to be able to start hunting Russian subs, that is going to cause a lot of damage to the Russians. That's bad. It's great, but it's bad for the Russians. The Boris Johnson said that Germany just wanted to get the war over with at the very beginning and let Ukraine lose, and the French were being naive and in denial. Russia launched a cyber attack on the European Parliament after the Parliament overwhelmingly declared Russia a state sponsor of terror, and Russia is tightening its anti-LGBT laws in an effort to basically shore up support at home. The Russians kind of like to do their little go after gay and trans people to try to find an enemy. They like to go after Jews too. It's what they do. So, all right, guys, this was good. Thank you for joining me. I am going to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. I'm going to skip the, let's go. Thanks, Annie. I'm going to skip my Discord tonight. I can tell my voice is getting raspy again. I think it's my allergies. But tomorrow is Thanksgiving here in America, which is probably the second biggest holiday right after Christmas. So, the dogs is cute. I'm going to go help my mother do more preparation. I made the stuffing earlier today. I'm going to help Mom bake some pumpkin pies tonight and then make the cranberry sauce. So I'm going to do that. And so tomorrow, being a big holiday here in the States, I will not be, just wait. I'm not playing with you right now. Just wait. The dog. Tomorrow being a big holiday here in the States, I will not be doing my show, but I know my voice, that's interesting. Well, the only thing is my voice getting scratchy is last time I lost my voice in DC, but within 3 days of being here in Chicago, remember, it got better. So who knows what's happening with my voice? It's, what do you do? In any case, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I will be back Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm keeping an eye on the dog. Friday at 6 p.m. She's got to go out too. All right, I'll take you out. 1 second. I can always tell whenever my dog kind of goes by the door and starts pacing, it's trouble. But anyway, I'll be back Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. So join us then for the Ukraine update. Have a great Thanksgiving to all of the Americans out there, and everybody else. Just have a warm week and go do some Christmas shopping. And we start early here in America. Yeah. What are you doing? Oh, sorry. I'm looking at my dog again. Okay. I'm going to sign off. Goodbye, guys. Thank you again. Thank you, moderators. Thank you for all the gifts. You're all very generous and thoughtful, and I will see you again Friday. All right. Bye-bye.